Most of us are familiar with market crashes, but a financial disaster that we seem to encounter only in history books is called a panic. What exactly is a panic? Well, a financial panic is the frantic attempt to find or get something, liquidity. And what do we mean by liquidity? In finance, liquid assets are those that flow from person to person because most of us will accept them as payment for goods and services or to settle debts. In other words, the more liquid an asset is, the better it serves as a medium of exchange. Cash is usually the most liquid asset. Fortunately, panics are mostly a relic of the past in the United States. I can't recall a single financial episode after 1920 that has actually been called a panic. But from American independence all the way through the 19th and early 20th centuries, panics were a recurring feature of the domestic financial market. They occurred with astonishing regularity, at least once a decade, and often were followed by serious recessions and even depressions. In this lecture, we'll dig into the concept of financial panics by focusing on one that changed the course of American economic policy. This was the Panic of 1907, which introduces us to one of the most famous financiers in American history, John Pierpont Morgan, and brought about an end of the era of financial panics. Liquidity has at least two different meanings in finance. One is that it's the quality of being easily exchanged, usually for cash. For example, most bank deposits have high liquidity because they're easy to exchange for cash at just about any time by making a withdrawal. Personal checks circulate in much the same way that cash does, meaning that they are also highly liquid. Government bonds are highly liquid too because it's easy to sell them at a moment's notice for their full value in cash. On the other hand, assets like land may have low liquidity if it takes a long time to find a buyer who is willing to pay a fair price. The other definition of liquidity is that it's the condition of having enough liquid assets on hand to be able to pay off your anticipated expenses. When we perform a financial analysis on a company, we ask whether the firm has enough liquid assets to pay off its bills over the next 12 months. A company may own lots of assets, like factories and land, but still not have very much cash on hand. In that case, we'd say that the company isn't very liquid. Liquidity, in the sense of having enough liquid assets on hand, is absolutely essential to the successful operation of a business. If you run out of liquid assets, then you can't pay for supplies and you can't pay wages to your employees. You can't actually do anything to earn the money you need. Undoubtedly, you'll have to shut down, at least temporarily, and that may become permanent, especially if you owe money to anyone. If so, you'll have to sell off your business's illiquid assets to raise enough cash to pay off your debts. It's a process called, what else? Liquidation. As I like to tell my students, you can be technically bankrupt and keep operating just fine so long as you've got sufficient cash to keep paying your bills and making your bond payments. Companies go out of business when they run out of cash. As you know, or probably suspected, financial panics typically originated at the banks. But to understand how the banking system kept creating this situation, we'll look first at the structure of the American banking system, and then at the functioning of the gold standard.